Hello BookTube, I'm Roz and this is hopefully going to be another journey through books. For this tag, I was tagged by Steve Donahue again and by Eleanor Macrodina again, two of my favourite booktubers. I strongly recommend that you watch their channels. I was hoping to film this with my dogs because Steve commented in my last video that when I mentioned his name, my cat arrived. So I was going to try and make it up to him and let him see my dogs. And this is just the attempt of filming while taking the thumbnail photograph. It did not work out very well, as you can see. I tried. I'm sorry. We've gone back to a puppy-proofed environment. Anyway, let me get on with the questions. So this is Josh's muffin book tag. I will link Josh's channel down below. Let's get on with the questions. So number one is blueberry. If someone said literature, who is the first writer that comes to mind? Unfortunately, I'm very boring here. I'm going to say Shakespeare. I suppose it's because I've had so much dealings with him, what with having to teach him almost every year. And then, oddly enough, I think Jane Austen. And then, weirdly enough, my mind went to The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. So I have no idea what to think about that. Besides, that was some very crazy leaps. Number two, English. A work of British literature that became easier to understand when discussed. Okay, so I've actually got a lot to say about this because generally I would say that when you talk about books in a group, generally you should be able to get something more out, right? Because we all come into these books, well, come into a certain book with our own reading history and our own experiences that we should be able to add something more or whatnot. But British history and British literature is not something that is very obscure. It's extremely popular, which makes this a little bit harder. I mean, for example, if I wanted to discuss Australian literature, or if I read a book of Australian literature, I'd love to speak to Leah about it and get her input from somebody who lives in Australia and her understanding of the culture and whatever the issue or themes might be. But British literature, do we not know British literature very well? But then there was something that stuck out in my mind. And it is literature, I suppose. It's not a novel, it's a poem. It's by T.S. Eliot, it's The Hollow Men. And I remember back in 2012, thank God they took this off the list, because it was part of the matric prescribed set work. Now, as a teacher, for content subjects, you get the textbook and that's the information that the kids need to know for the exams. English and other languages, it's not that simple. You get given the novel, the drama, the poetry, and they're blank. And it's your job as the teacher to do all the analysing and the hard work and then teach it. And I looked at The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot and I went, what the hell is this thing about? Now, one of the great things that I've had from having taught overseas for many years is that I have a group of friends who are all very much into books and reading, but we're spread all over the world. And we arranged a Skype date for a couple of nights in a row where we sat and we talked this poem through. And that experience was brilliant because, one, I think I'm one of those people that as I'm saying stuff, so I'm figuring out what I'm thinking, especially in safe environments. And so that was pretty cool, and getting all the input and other people's reading experiences, because the one thing with T.S. Eliot that makes his poetry difficult to understand is the fact that he alludes to things very vaguely. For example, in The Hollow Men, he doesn't say, you know, here we go around the mulberry bush. He says, here we go around the prickly pear, the prickly pear, the prickly pear. Now, obviously, that one's an easy one to pick up on, but the rest of his allusions are a hell of a lot more vague. So unless you're T.S. Eliot, I don't know how you can understand everything that's in his poetry. So the bigger the brain group that you have when you're going through it, the better it is, because the more people have been exposed to other things. So that experience was brilliant. I really appreciated it. And if any of the ladies who were in that group are watching now today, thank you. I still appreciate it, even 6 years later. Number three, Corn. A book that is great to take on the go and read at any time. Anything under 400 pages, and preferably not action-packed. Because if it's action-packed, second to Nanny's, as I get to the cliffhanger, I'm either going to be called up at the end of the queue, or I'm going to end up having to be somewhere and someone's going to interrupt my reading. I haven't got into e-readers as yet. There are a couple of reasons for it. One, I like my books. This wouldn't look like that if I had a tablet on it with this many books on. It would be pretty open. But the other thing is that I kind of don't really want to spend that much money on something, because ebooks are still quite expensive, that I don't actually own. And then there's also the consideration that technology is improving so fast that the books that I might buy now for an e-reader will be probably incompatible with whatever technology is available in, say, 10 years from now. I mean, all the computer games that we bought when we were kids, we can't use them anymore. In fact, not even kids, because, yeah, that was a long time ago. But I think you understand where I'm getting at. You know, if I want to buy something, these books are mine. I can sell them, I can loan them out, not that I do generally, but they're mine to do with as I please. And whereas if I've got something in an e-copy, if I have to give it to you, now suddenly I'm guilty of piracy. So, I kind of like my tactile books. They belong to me, they belong to nobody, and in 10 years from now, I can still read them, so long as I look after them. And I do. So anything under 400 pages, because anything over 400 pages starts becoming a bit of a drain on the shoulder in the handbag. Number 4, chocolate chip. A writer you feel was or has been able to write during all aspects of their lives. This was another one that really got me to think, because to give you a completely honest answer, I would have to have read the entire works of that particular author, and there are very few authors that I have. I've read most of Lee Child, pretty much all of Kathy Reichs. You can see that guilty pleasure reads are definitely up there. I've read all of Jane Austen. I'm still working on Dickens. I've read most of the Brontes. But who would I say has always been on their game? I can't say that I would say Lee Child or Kathy Reichs write spectacularly brilliantly ever. So no, they don't qualify. So I'm going to go with Jane Austen, simply because she's the only writer that I've read in the entirety. And in those little Penguin Black Classics, they had some of her early works as well. And although you can see that she was very young, I'm going to give her kudos for being very good for a very young age. And it was also interesting being able to see the development of ideas that would later become parts in later works. Number 5, Oatmeal Raisin. A bookish trait you feel is just not necessary. Oh wow. Do you have a month? Sit down, get comfortable. There are so many of them. There are so many of my pet hates, which are one of the reasons why I don't read YA all that much anymore. Also because I'm no longer stocking a library for kids, so there's no need. But the love triangle used to drive me up the wall. Also, promoting the bad boy. Yes, he might be the more exciting choice. But why? Why do we want to do this to kids? Make them think that this is the exciting bad guy, the unreliable one is the one to go for. Because, one, the myth that you can change somebody is a myth. You can't change them. So he will remain the bad boy who is unreliable and who has the wandering eye or whatever a bad trait it was that he had. So that one really bugs me. And then the other one that really bugs me is wisdom out of the mouth of babes. Whenever there's young child characters in a book, around about 5 years old, and they start sprouting wisdom, I get very annoyed very fast. Yeah, let me just cut it off there, because this otherwise would be one hell of a long conversation, because there are loads of them that really bug me. Bran, what kind of reading material do you find you constantly force yourself through? School set workbooks. I loved Animal Farm for the first 10 years, and then it started to go a bit downhill from there. And it's not because I didn't enjoy it for my own reading pleasure, it's because teaching it, it's so slow, and you've got to re-explain everything, and you need to maintain this enthusiasm. And that was for a good book that I enjoyed. Try the rubbish that I've got to teach now. I didn't even feel like finishing it the first time, and now I've got to teach it until they decide to change the syllabus. Number 7, Cranberry-Orange. Is that real? What two characters from different works would you like to see in one? Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've got a character and then a different book series. I want to see Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell in Game of Thrones. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One, this never-ending book would have been finished in 1 or 2 at the most. It would have been definitive, it would have been moving, and it would have been a hell of a lot shorter. A lot more effective too, I reckon. Number 8, Coffee Cake. If you could see any poet, dead or alive, recite poetry at your cafe, which one would it be? Sure. This is another tricky one. I know that I'm fond of the works of Keats. I'm fond of what I've read of Blake. Not such a big fan of Wordsworth. But the poet that I love teaching the most, besides Maya Angelou, is Wilfred Owen, oddly enough. I really actually enjoy war poetry and teaching war poetry because you can really get into it, and it's tactile and it's there, especially the way he wrote war poetry. And I would be kind of interested, I think, to hear him read it, to hear the alliteration and the assonance and everything else, but also to hear how he pauses, where he pauses, what he stresses. Yeah, because war poetry is, I'm not talking about the onward Christian soldiers type, where everything was about honor and glory. As Terry Goodkind said in Wizard's First Rule, nobody goes to war believing God's on the other side. But when it got down to the trenches and that type of poetry, that was moving. It really captured emotion, because the men who were there experiencing it, like Wilfred Owen was and Siegfried Sassoon, that really carried power. And yeah, I would like to. I think it could be a haunting experience, but I would be very interested to hear him say it as he heard it when he put it on paper. Then the Cruffin, the croissant-muffin, a great short work of French literature. Ugh. I've only read long French literature, really, other than Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, and that was 24 years ago now, so I don't want to judge my memory on that. So I'm going to go with The Plague by Albert Camus, because that one was pretty recent. I can remember that, and there were elements of it that I really enjoyed. The same as with The Stranger by him as well, which is actually shorter, so maybe I should go with that one. We'll go with both. Muffin Top, a work that would be better abridged. I think from my earlier answer you can probably guess. Game of Thrones, particularly A Dance with Dragons. I really felt that it was unnecessarily long, unnecessarily plod along when nothing was happening. Yeah, I think he would have done well to have just skipped A Dance with Dragons and then started a couple of years in the future and just gone, well, this is what happened while you weren't here, and filled us in a chapter, because I think I could have summarized A Dance with Dragons in a chapter, if not 3 sentences. Number 11. What is your favorite muffin? I generally love bran muffins, but a friend of mine recently made bran muffins with fig and something else in it, and she gave me a batch of them. They were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But as a rule, I'm not generally a cakey person. And then number 12. Let's go to, what did I write there? Drury Lane. Who do you tag? So I'm going to tag Between Lines in Life, because I think there's some answers over here that would be very interesting to hear from her, and I owe her a couple of tags. Then Beacon Hill Books, sorry. Candace, I know, has got her hands full at the moment, but I've been wanting to see a video from her for a long time. And the same goes for Leah at Hide and Seek, because it's been a while since I've seen a video. Not that I'm sure she hasn't got ideas. I'm pretty sure life's just keeping her busy, both of them actually. And then I'd like to speak about a very new booktuber. Her name is Rashmika Likes Books. I will link all of these down below. And she is a young South African girl who is studying pharmacy. And wow, I'm very impressed. It gives me hope for the young generation when you hear her talk. She's extremely critical about what she reads. She reads classics and normal adult contemporary books. And I think a lot of you who subscribe to me would probably enjoy her channel as well. So Rashmika, you are tagged, and I know I owe you one too. I will be getting on that very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.